Welcome to another episode of the Empowered Half Hour. I am so excited to share with you today's guest, Wayne Basinger. We share a similar passion on burnout, and I met Wayne in a program called Big Talk Academy with Trisha Brook, which allowed us to harness our message. Both of us have a passion to talk about burnout, but to do it on stages so that we can impact more people in less time. And one of the things that we learned in the program was to get to the heart of our message really quickly. And because both of us like burnout, I was like, Wayne, come on the show. And he was super excited to join. So Wayne, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here. It's an honor to talk with you.
Thank you. I cannot wait to get into it. First, I'd like to read your bio so the listeners have a little bit more understanding of your background. Wayne Basinger is a highly rated motivational speaker with over 20 years of classroom teaching experience. We have a teacher, folks. Thank you for the work that you do. He conducts professional development seminars at conferences through the state of California, combining classroom experience with creative and inspiring ideas that motivate and transform his audiences. Once again, Wayne, happy that you're here.
Thanks so much. Can't wait.
Before I ask you the first question, I do want to share with the audience that this is a special episode. This episode is airing on Father's Day because I spend so much time talking about women in burnout and just burnout in general, but my heart couldn't be happier to have a father on the show who's a teacher talking about burnout. I feel like I want to honor all the dads out there that are busting their butt and going through burnout too. So again, I am just happy to be sharing this episode with you. So Wayne, what is your burnout story? How did you end up here and passionate about talking about it, writing about it? What is your burnout story?
So it was the third day of spring semester in 2021, and I'm in a deep sleep, and all of a sudden my heart just starts racing, my mind explodes, and the only thought going through my head is, you're not ready to teach today. Your lesson's going to be a complete failure. So I literally run to my computer. I start frantically looking through files, trying to find anything that can make my lesson more engaging, more exciting, can actually fill up the time. And then I take a look at the clock in the corner of the screen, and it's 2:30 in the morning. And I literally look at myself in the reflection of the screen, and I'm like, what are you doing? And it dawns on me, like, I think I'm having a panic attack, but I've never had one before. So I literally have to Google, what are the symptoms of a panic attack? And it's like racing mind, racing heartbeat, and inability to focus. I'm like, yep, I'm having my first panic attack. And so I use that moment to go, I don't know how to deal with this. I'm struggling. Something's going on that I've never experienced before. So I reach out for help. I reach out to a therapist that I'd worked with in the past. And weirdly enough, I just listened to episode number 8, and it's all about intuition. And I actually got rerouted to another therapist in the group, like not the woman I'd worked with in the past.
Oh, wow.
And so my head's telling me like, no, work with a woman. You've got a relationship. But something inside said, no, this is the person you were meant to work with. Things don't happen on accident. The universe has a purpose. You got sent there. And so she and I started working together. It was literally like magic. I got my head under control. I changed the way I was approaching the classroom, and it felt like the clouds parted and the sun started shining again.
That's really incredible. And burnout is such an important topic, as you know, and so many people are very hungry to use the word break up with it all the time, but to get out of it, prevent it, understand it, all of it. But you said one thing that really brought me back to my own burnout story, and that is you asked for help. When I had a nervous breakdown, so I collapsed to the bathroom floor. My form of help at the time, although I did end up going to therapy too, was I called out to the universe. But I think the commonality is that you reached out for help. And so before I ask you your next question and we go deeper into your story, what advice would you have for the listeners, especially the male listeners too? Because I know just from experiencing my husband, and I have a son, it's harder, I think, sometimes for males to ask for help. And so what message would you have for the dads out there and the general listeners as far as reaching out for help and the component it plays in breaking up with burnout?
A catchphrase that was real popular during COVID was, it's okay not to be okay. But yeah, it's okay not to be okay, but you can't sit there. So like I amended it like it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to stay there.
I love
And
that.
so I knew this was something I'd never experienced before. I didn't have the tools to do it. Like I grew up in a very Germanic, my name is Basinger, if you do it in the Austrian, stoic, men don't cry, men don't emote. You just suffer through, right? You embrace the suck. That's stupid. When you are facing things you've never felt before, you need help beyond what you know what to do. And that was what I just knew. I'd never been to this place before. If I were to put it in your framework, I was definitely at level 4 and I didn't want to hit level 5. And so it was like, okay, it's time to reach out. When you're going through a place you've never been before, it's time to ask for help.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And for the listeners who might be hearing this for the first time or hearing about burnout level 4 for the first time, in 5 stages of burnout, there is stage 1, which I call the unders. You're starting to feel undervalued, underappreciated. Stage 2 is when you're doing the overworking, the overanalyzing, the overthinking. And in stage 3, you may not be fully aware of your unders and overs, but you're starting to question at work, am I in the right profession? Should I leave? Or am I in the right job? Should I change roles? You start having those thoughts. And typically, we're not ready to make a decision. And what Wayne was referring to is when we stay in the same situation that's causing this mass stress on us, we begin to feel disharmony in our bodies. You're feeling disharmony in your mental space, emotional space, physical space, spiritual, and sometimes even financial. Anyways, I just wanted to give some context, but I really appreciate you sharing that because that level of vulnerability helps other people move through it. And that's going to lead me to my next question. Here you are, you ended up having this panic attack in the middle of the night. You realized this isn't me. Why am I up at 2:30? You did the brave thing. You asked for help. You're starting to get help. But what did you have to overcome to become the Wayne you are today that are helping other people move through it?
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing I had to get my hands on was the negative thoughts that kept running through my head. And that was the first exercise my therapist led me to, was attacking these things called automatic negative thoughts, or ants. What was great, we developed a strategy together, a journaling technique called the ant eater. And so when these things would come up, then I would challenge them. So I would just journal. And the 3 big thoughts that kept hitting me were, you're not smart enough, you're not working hard enough, and you're not good enough. It was just the not enough story. And so what I would do is I would write those down and then I would write counters to it. Like, okay, when have I been smart enough? Well, I have 2 master's degrees, so I'm doing okay educationally. I teach philosophy and art history. So like, yeah, you need some brain power to be able to do that. Do I work hard enough? I'm grading essays over spring break. I work plenty
Yeah,
hard.
you're waking up at 2:30 in the morning
Right.
because you care that much,
Exactly. So I give heart and soul. And it's like, I am enough. And it's just ridiculous to tell myself that narrative. And so I just started rationally thinking through, when have these stories been wrong? And I'm like, they're almost always wrong. Okay. I'm in the most ridiculous situation in the history of teaching, right? We're trying to teach through a global pandemic. That day I was referencing, that 3rd day of the semester, Omicron hit. And so 1/3 of my class is out. So I'm trying to teach online and in-person students simultaneously. No training. They're just like, oh, use Zoom. Okay, but that doesn't mean you know how to jump back and forth
Yeah,
between
and
an
manage a
in-person
hybrid environment.
and wearing a mask and trying to make sure the audio and the computer are working and you're actually engaging the kids that are sitting in the room who hadn't been in school for a year. And so it was just, I started looking at what were the external factors that were causing me to really struggle, instead of looking internally and saying it's all my fault, it's my problem. When you actually start to put the blame on where the blame lies, you can come up with solutions to make it better.
I love that you turned it around to solutions because as we talk about burnout specifically, I think it's often a place of hopelessness and powerlessness until you can get the help. But also there's this piece of self-reliance. If you can turn inward, like you were saying, and be like, oh, I'm also part of my solution, it kind of helps you shift. I also wanted to just go back and can you talk about ant eating again? I think that's just like a practical tip that you guys as listeners might be able to take away from Wayne's discussion here is maybe you can be an anteater too. So if you could talk about that a little bit more, that'd be great.
Yeah, when I first started it literally, I just drew a T chart, right? So line in the middle, page line at the top, and what are my automatic negative thoughts on the left? And I just listed them. And of course, it's like a page and a half the first time you do it. And then on the right, you just start countering, okay, so when has this not been true? When have I been able to use strategies or ideas to counter that and not be that person, not have those thoughts? And all of a sudden, I'm writing 5 or 6 answers to each one of those negative thoughts. And I'm like, these thoughts are ridiculous. I'm rarely, if ever, that. When you rationally counter it, it's like, well, when that thought comes again, you're like, that's not true. You're basically just giving yourself the ammunition. So when those thoughts come, you're able to shoot them down immediately. And it's like, no, I am working hard. I am smart. I am good enough. I just need better strategies. And when that comes to mind, then you're out looking, okay, then I can get help from my therapist. I can go read these books. I can go to these blogs and start getting the ideas that can make that transformation.
I love that you went deeper on that because I love practical tools. I think I love philosophy and I can spend so much time up in the open where there aren't as many rules, but then you come back to this earthly experience and I need something practical. I need to know that I can grab a piece of paper, write a T, and then like write all my negative thoughts. And then on the other side, write whether they're true or not. Little things like that often are so powerful. So again, appreciate that. And that kind of leads me into my next question. Now that you're on the other side, what would you say is one of your primary lessons you've learned or a big aha that you've gained?
Basically, I ended up writing a book in order to process what I went through. Initially, it was just for me. And then I was like, wait a minute, I think these tips can actually help others. And so I broke the book into 3 parts. Change the way you think so that you change the way you act to change the kind of person that you want to become. So it's think, act, be. I borrowed it from the Stoics, who weirdly enough, you never learn about in undergraduate philosophy classes, but have the most practical philosophies on the planet to actually help you deal with life. I call it the tab method, right? Like the tab you have on the life vest in the airplane. Sometimes you got to pull that tab and
Yeah,
keep
I like
yourself
that a
afloat
lot.
until help can come. And so that was really the order. Change the way you think so that you can change the actions you're taking and you can be the person that you know you can be and that you ought to be.
That's really awesome. And I want to take a second, if you don't mind, sharing the title of your book, because oftentimes listeners will be like, oh, he has a book. I know we'll talk about it at the end, but if you could go ahead and just share the title for anybody who's sitting there curious right now.
Sure. It's called Just Give Up, the 13 Toxic Mindsets to Give Up Instead of Your Teaching Career. And so I wanted to make the title ironic because when people hear it initially, they're like, we don't want teachers to give up. I'm like, well, neither do I. I actually want them to tackle and give up the negative thoughts and the negative strategies so that they can move beyond it and stay in the job that they were called to do and that they love.
That's awesome because a lot of my friends that are teachers, they absolutely do love their job. And teaching is a tough gig. Just in general, I know that people always talk about the pay and then the politics. And then you add, like you said, the next level of complexity, COVID, hybrid teaching, short staff because people are resigning. There's just so much that happened. And the answer isn't for everyone to bail, especially if it is your passion. I'm sure for some people, the right answer might be a career shift. However, I believe that probably a lot of people may have left even the profession that miss it terribly. So I like that your message is how to deal with it and stay in your role.
We got short staffed. What person in our department left. And so I had to pick up an extra class during that terrible semester. No downtime, no time to grade, no time to plan. All of that now has to be done at home. I meditate a couple times a day, and I literally had to go out to my car and sit in my car for the lunch period in order to get that 20 minutes of meditation time. But that was essential for me in order
Yeah.
to be able to just regain focus and come with passion for those last couple classes of the day.
I love that you said come with passion because that like passion oozes from me too. And I feel like it's the part of my spirit that keeps me alive. And that's actually leads into the next question too. Why are you passionate about this topic? I mean, we've touched on it a little bit, but I really would like you to share more with the audience of why talk about this.
Because I just see how people are struggling. I walk around my school and you can just see teachers who, the moment they walk in the door, they look depressed. it's a struggle to get to their classroom. And I don't, like, I'm on fire. I get there 2 hours early and people meet me in the hallway. They're like, how are you doing? I'm like, fantastic. I can't wait to teach today. And I think people should approach their jobs like that, because that's what
I do
lights you
too.
up. That's what makes you just feel like you're doing something incredible in the world.
No, I was going to say that's absolutely right. And that's a big message of mine too. I think that there's so many ways to do things. So I'm not necessarily one to say that one way is right over the other. But in my personal experience, I've seen so many of my friends when something's not going well at work or they're starting to get burnt out, maybe quit their job and start entrepreneurship to only to find that entrepreneurship is equally as hard and stressful and sometimes more. And so then they start feeling lost. Some people do the entrepreneur gig right off the bat and are awesome. But I guess my point is I am always hungry for more people that are able to stay within their specialty and find the way out and find their way back to passion, find their way back to success. I too stayed in my sales roles. I also have a speaking business and I love writing. So I sell books. It's similar to, that's how we met. But I can't say enough to the listeners that you don't have to abandon your career or your profession if, in fact, it is the very thing that lights you up. And I'd love you to take that away as part of Wayne's main message here and why he's passionate of sharing, because there is a way. And you're more than welcome to pick up Wayne's book to find out a little bit more about his approach. But Wayne, I wanted to ask you, if people adapted kind of the philosophy that we're talking about here, how would it change their life?
Well, first of all, you feel a million times better up front. Whenever your thoughts go from negative to positive, I mean, you can't help but feel better. And so that tends to start a positive spiral upward where, okay, what are some behaviors I'm adopting that aren't helping me out? Like mine was, I would run to bad food and alcohol. Those were just my coping mechanisms, right? I imagine most of the audience, or shopping, or there's a coping mechanism you run to when you're stressed out and you're feeling burned out. And rarely are they good. So then I started like, okay, I went on a diet program. I hit the age of 50 and I went for the annual checkup and the doctor's like, you've got to lose weight. And so I dropped 50 pounds at the age of 50. That was just my goal and I hit it. When you change your thinking, you start changing your behavior. And then it's like, I'm just a different person and the best version of me that I can be. Who doesn't want that? I want to show up the best I can for my wife and my kids and my students and my community of teachers. And if I can do that, then I can leave this earth feeling great about the contribution I made.
I love that. One of the sayings that I have too about burnout is on the other side of burnout is your best life. And people think I'm crazy when I say that, or that it's like my motivational mantra or something. But I'm like, no, I mean, when you understand what you're going through and then you do the work, you actually liberate yourself in a way.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast last week and the person said, I'm going to turn my burnout into my success story. And that so resonated with me. I'm like, I'm to the point where I'm actually thankful for that moment of burnout because it launched me on a new trajectory. I've written a book. I dreamed about doing it, but I never did it. I'm going out and speaking, which I'd done kind of on the side, but now I have a burning passion to go out and share the story. It was one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And it's weird to say that about a burnout where you're experiencing panic attacks for the first time. But now in hindsight, I can see that it actually was.
I feel the same about mine. I mean, when I fell to the bathroom floor in my most powerless moment, I had a nervous breakdown and it changed my entire life too. I rose off the bathroom floor, a different woman than the one that went down when I realized like, hey, I'm the CEO of my life. If I'm the CEO of my life, why am I crying on this bathroom floor? I have a lot more power in this than I think I do. I didn't know what to do, but similarly to you, like my first call out was to the universe. And then my second call the next day was to a really dear friend of mine who was actually the person that helped me get the job that got me out of the job that I had burnout.
Wow.
So there's a couple things in this, guys. If you're listening to my story and you're listening to Wayne's story, the empowerment comes from so many things. But one is admitting that you have a problem. Wayne was 2:30 in the morning writing lesson plans. That's a problem.
Yeah.
I am too short resourced to be emotionally available for my family. That's what triggered me into my breakdown that night. And that was a problem. If I'm going through steps, then we both asked for help in our own way. And then we both did the work. And I just want to give hope to people who are listening that you can get out of burnout. And as Wayne mentioned, oftentimes it ends up being your success story.
Yeah, what I found is I now have so much more empathy for others that are in the struggle. When I was going through it, I read a lot of Brene Brown, who I think is just awesome. One of her mantras is they're doing the best they can. Because I used to sit in judgment all the time, like, if I can do this, teach this hard, raise kids, why can't you step up and do it? Now that I've been through it, it's like they're struggling. There's something going on that I have no idea about. And they are literally doing the best they can. And I have no right to judge them because I know I didn't show up as my best self during COVID. I was simply doing the best that I can.
Oh, that's a wonderful message too, because it's true. So one thing that I would love to talk about is, since this is the Father's Day episode, from your point of view of being a father, what was going through your head as you were experiencing burnout?
That I wanted to be a good example for my kids, that I didn't want to leave them with a legacy of a father who wasn't emotionally available, a father who and went down the road of doing damage to my body through alcohol, through really terrible food. I want to be there to see my grandkids, and I wanted to be the legacy of empowerment so that my kids, when they struggle, and everybody does, they can go, look, I know what my dad went through. He made it. I can make it too.
Wow, that gave me the goosebumps from head to toe. That was so powerful. On that note of empowerment, for the dads that are listening to this, what message of empowerment would you have to any dads that are struggling with burnout right now?
I would say get over the whole idea of men don't ask for help. We have to struggle alone, suck it up and deal. At times you have to, but that's not the way to cope with things, especially if you've never experienced what you're experiencing before. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay not to be okay, but more importantly, it's not okay to stay there. And asking for help is the fastest and best way to get yourself out of that place.
I love that so much. And I want to also honor the teachers that are listening to this podcast too. I wanted to ask you this question from both perspectives, one of being a dad and then one of being a teacher. So what would you say to your fellow teachers that are listening to this podcast that are facing burnout, having to work on lesson plans, short-staffed, doing hybrid learning environments? What message do you have for them?
We hear it all the time in professional development sessions that you can't pour from an empty cup. It's true. It's cliche because it's so incredibly true. You've got to fill yourself up first, and you have to protect your time and your personal life and the things that recharge you so that you can get back in that room every day and be the best you can. Last week was our open house, and I had a parent come up to me and say, you helped save my child's life. For a minute there, I was just like, what are you talking about? And she's like, yeah, my child was depressed. My child was struggling last year. And you were honest and open about your struggles. And you were telling the kids how you were dealing with it. And I tried to incorporate what I was using in my philosophy class to help kids. And she's like, you're one of the reasons my kid is here today. It was one of those total goosebump head to toe moments. Wow. I was showing up as a really flawed and vulnerable version of myself, but that's what that kid needed. They needed to see it and they needed to hear it. And if one parent said it, dozens know it. And so that's why I was called to stay in that room, because I had a job to do, and it was to be flawed and vulnerable and to stand there in that and still cope and move forward and become the best version of myself.
Wow, that was really, really powerful. I definitely, definitely teared on that one. First, I just want to say that that's just such an honor. And I think that I want to applaud you for being vulnerable and knowing that that vulnerability was the thing that helped somebody else save their life. I mean, that's the power we get when we share our story. So for all the listeners out there, Wayne saved another life because he had the courage to work on himself, address his issues, and then be vulnerable and share. And there's always so much healing that we can do when we share the truth of our stories. And Wayne, before we close out, I would just be really interested to hear how that impacted you. How did hearing that reinforce your journey, or however you want to answer the question? But I'm very curious what happened to you after that.
Well, I knew I couldn't stop there. First of all, it was incredibly inspiring to think that you played even a minuscule role in saving a kid's life. So what I've started doing, I'm now inviting teachers that I know are incredibly burned out. We go to dinner together and I just give them space to tell their story, how they're burned out, what their struggle is. And then I bought a lot of copies of your workbook and I'm handing them out like candy at Halloween. And it's like, hey, if you want an accountability partner to walk through this thing together, I'm for it because I know what the struggle's like. But I also know how bright the sun can be on the other side of that
Yes.
burnout and that struggle.
That's awesome. I am so honored to have you share your story on this podcast because I know it's going to touch the life of others. What I'd like to ask next is how can the audience stay connected with you?
The easiest way is through my website, is waynebasinger.com. I have a link to my book there. I'm going out and presenting, so I have a couple of the Big Talk Academy, my talk from there. And I get real vulnerable about some things that happened at school that should have knocked me to my knees, but because I'd been through the burnout struggle, I was prepared for it and I was mentally strong and was able to weather it.
Yeah, that talk is really powerful. It's about 10 minutes. And if it's up on his website, you guys should go check it out. It's very moving and inspiring. Lastly, I just want to say that I'm very moved by your story, and I would like to send you a case of the Workplace Burnout Workbook on me. I'll send you a case. I think there's 24 in a case or something like that. And that way you could just hand them out to people. I mean, I'm sure there's more than enough people that they could use, but
Trust
I
me, I will
appreciate your
become your
passion.
greatest cell evangelist, I swear. No, what you did in that workbook, it's just short, succinct, and just so perfect
Oh, thank
to meet a
you.
person where they're at and help them get to the other side of the struggle.
Thank you. And again, thank you for your time. And I'm sure I will have you back on the show at some point. So once again, Wayne, thank you for coming on the Empowered Half Hour.
Love it. Can't wait.